We're live, week 15 upon us, and already 3 games in the books. Lots of interesting things. And just like Thanksgiving, when you have 3 games in the books, you have a better idea if you need to go for ceiling or floor. So that should help enhance your abilities. And also, if you've made it to week 15, you're probably a pretty good fantasy football mind, but we can always use help from the good Dr. Gene Bramwell and Matt Waldman as we prepare and we break down these week 15 matchups. And Gene, on our mind, first and foremost, T.Y. Hilton. And obviously, we're going to find out whether he plays or not. But if he is active, and we're hearing everything from he's going to test it out to there's a good shot because he's a tough guy. But that's all well and good. How much should we exercise caution if he is active, knowing what we know about his condition?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm sorry, guys. I really don't. I think it's recency bias would tell you that him playing through a shoulder injury last week so successfully means that today, if he plays, he should be able to do the same. But he practiced last Friday. There was a lot more optimism last Friday. Frank Reich on this Friday said his status was still up in the air. They're taking him right through game time. They didn't even practice him Friday to see how the ankle might respond into Saturday. There wasn't a very good view of the injury, but possibly a high ankle sprain just from the way it looked, but a very low grade situation. We've seen players recover from that, play very well in the game in which they were injured, and then struggle through the week. Just seems like that's kind of where we are here. But yes, T.Y. Hilton plays through almost anything. The Colts are in the thick of the wild card race. They need to get a win. It's a good matchup for him, generally speaking. So it's a really tough call. I think we need to put last week behind us. Last week was a different injury, a different situation, a different matchup, and a different outcome. So I think there's concern there. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this with everything so up in the air. I've got a decision between Hilton and Josh Reynolds and Traquan Smith, the guys that I put on my bench specifically for kind of a high upside option if I needed them. And I'm hoping, I don't put a lot of stock in pregame warmups, but I'm hoping we hear something specific enough or a little bit of an update that somebody was holding on just until we heard that he played that was pretty positive, and that would make me feel a little bit better. But the tone of this week's reports, the tone of Frank Reich's comments on Friday just had me pretty nervous about Hilton today.
This is like, was it a William Hurt movie, The Doctor, whenever the doctor became the patient, right? Right around the same time as Regarding Henry, that good, the
Right.
Harrison Ford film. There was a couple of films about being humbled, although Dr. Gene is the humblest, so he never needs to be humbled. Matt, well, let's help Dr. Gene. Let's help everyone else out there. Unfortunately, my T.Y. Hilton teams got eliminated last week, so I don't have a T.Y. Hilton decision. But my knee-jerk reaction to the idea of this is what I did this morning. I did downgrade T.Y. Hilton in my rankings, but I only downgraded him to about wide receiver 15 to 20, around players like Corey Davis, Tyler Lockett, Mike Evans, players that in and of themselves have the boom bust profile without an injury that we know T.Y. Hilton will have today if active. And Josh Reynolds has proved out to be a player this year, but I'm actually, because of the Nick Foles development, worried that this is really going to be a Todd Gurley game or even a John Kelly second half. The Eagles aren't going to put up much of a fight. So I would say an active Hilton, even without the positive thumbs up wink, where everything's going to be okay. I still would play T.Y. Hilton over Reynolds, and Traquan Smith, I think, is outside of our circle of trust at this point. But Matt, what do you think about Hilton today, if active, and Dr. Gene's quandary?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, and I have a Hilton decision in one of my leagues. I'm up about 60 points in an IDP league where he's my third receiver. So I'm probably going to start him because the only other options I have left on my bench are it's a dynasty league. So all I have left are players like Alan Hearns and Richie James and Martavis Bryant. So I could go to the waiver wire, but nobody's really there. So, if you're in a situation where he's one of your main guys, I think that at some point you have to look at this and decide that is getting 1 to 2 more points really, that's my situation. Is I might be able to pick someone who might get 1 to 3 points. Is that going to make a difference? It might, but at the same time, I'd rather have a guy who has the upside of giving me 15, 20, 25, 30 points because of what he's able to do.
What if the other option was Reynolds? What if Reynolds was your other option on the bench? Can you simulate that for us?
I get I guess, you look at options, you look at him as that option. He's still the third option. He's still not, he's getting some red zone looks there. But I would still probably go with Hilton in this case. Just because you look at Hilton and you realize that it, it is that they're still in it. They're still in the thick of things. He's still probably needed. There's also ways that they may be able to find him some easy targets, just on the matchups of, the coverage matchups. So he may not have a huge day, but I think his floor may be even still as good as Reynolds' ceiling at this point.
What about boom bust Panthers playing tomorrow night, like DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel? Matt, or do you read me?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm sorry. What would you? I'm weighing. We're going down the T.Y. Hilton versus options. So what about T.Y. Hilton against one of those young, explosive Panthers receivers against the Saints tomorrow night?
That's the tougher one, and mainly because of Cam Newton. So I would say, a guy like Curtis Samuel might not be a bad play, just because it seems like they use him more in the shallow passing game, and they're finding ways to get him the ball a little bit more often in ways that Cam Newton's comfortable with. DJ Moore is a little bit more up and down at this stage, so I'd say, Hilton might be a guy that you use over DJ Moore if the I mean, I think that the way we look at it is we'll have to again wait for the workout, and if the workout is pretty good, then I would do that. If the workout looks pretty dire, even though they're gonna he's gonna try to play
right
type of thing, then you probably go with Moore.
And really quick before, because you did a nice setup for the next thing I'll ask Dr. Gene about, but really quick, if T.Y. Hilton is inactive, Matt, and people are in kind of a situation like you, where I have to go to the waiver wire, or my other options are really scraping the bottom of the barrel. Dontrell Inman, Ryan Grant, Chester Rogers, Zach Pascal. If you had to just close your eyes and throw a dart at one of them, which of the four might be the best chances of hitting a bullseye?
I'll go with Pascal, the Old Dominion kid, just mainly because they seem to like his size, and the way that they've even used him, even with Inman in the lineup. Inman probably will give you the most experience and be the guy that he might give you the highest floor, but Pascal will probably give you the highest ceiling.
And Pascal has had some moments. They've all had some moments, mainly because of one Andrew Luck, who actually has been about as good with T.Y. Hilton in the lineup as he's been without him in the lineup from a fantasy perspective. I guess what I'm trying to say is I would not downgrade Andrew Luck too much. And Gene, he's going to get his center, Ryan Kelly, back this week, yeah?
Yeah, but he's without guard Mike Lewinsky, who's been pretty good as well. It's great to get Kelly back, but there's still some continuity issues with the line.
It's going to be a good game. Actually, all three of the games we've had so far this week have been fantastic games, and tons of effort. All three games, like playoff kind of intensity at the end. We got one Monday night that has got playoff intensity and playoff implications for both teams, Gene. And Matt set it up. If you're thinking about Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore this week, you're thinking about Cam Newton, and we've got practice reports, and this is one, Gene, where maybe the practice reports aren't the best guide. Our eyes watching him on the field has been our best guide. What can you do to help as a guide when deciding about Cam Newton and all the players that depend on Cam Newton tomorrow night?
I think the big thing with Newton is his arm strength and his accuracy downfield, and that's not as big a deal for Moore and Samuel and McCaffrey as it would be for a little bit more of a downfield passing game or downfield receivers that run a little bit more limited route tree. So I think there's still some upside with Newton. His completion percentage has been a little bit higher this year, probably because of the way the offense is running. Teams are a little bit more aware now that Newton's arm strength is limited. He's not been practicing. They've brought him out of the game for Hail Marys. Norv Turner today said that the offense is affected because of what Newton is and isn't able to do, and he's concerned about some of the continuity lost because Newton isn't practicing and throwing that much. But up until last week, Newton was still throwing a couple of touchdown passes a week. He's still running the ball 6 to 10 times. So unlike some other players, maybe Ryan Tannehill a few weeks ago, or those types of guys, were worried a little bit about their arm strength, and there's not as much around the red zone upside, even though Newton's not been running in the ball very much. That upside is still there for Newton. So I don't think you have to downgrade him too much. I think you move him down a tier or so. I think you do have to be a little bit worried about the receiving game, depending on how the defense decides to adjust to Newton's issues. But I don't know how much you downgrade Samuel and DJ Moore because of the type of routes they run.
So, Matt, let's put it to the test. And it's tomorrow night's game, but I think this game has a lot of reach into fantasy lineups in week 15, Matt. Start with Cam Newton, and we'll just do the either or, Cam Newton or. All right, Matt. Cam Newton or the quarterback in the same game, Drew Brees.
Brees.
Yeah, and I would agree there. I think even though Brees has had a couple of floor games, it's Drew Brees. This is the whole, and I know some people out there will say, "Oh, I don't like this. It's too emotional. It's too psychological." But sometimes when I'm making decisions in the fantasy football playoffs, I do the "what can I live with" test. I could live with losing because I started Drew Brees. I can live with that. Can we live with Matt starting Lamar Jackson over Cam Newton?
Yeah, absolutely. I would start Lamar Jackson over Cam Newton. I would feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I actually think that this could be the one, even though the game script isn't going to force Lamar Jackson to throw a lot, this could be the game where Lamar Jackson breaks off that 70-yard touchdown run against Tampa and makes your week. What about Mitchell Trubisky? And Matt, with Mitchell Trubisky, if we're reverse engineering what happened in week 14 with Trubisky, there's also the element of the LA Rams defense, which now that Nick Foles is in there might be more of a moot point. Although if you're looking for a defense this week, the Rams defense might be good. How much of last week was rust from Trubisky? How much of it is Trubisky's flaws that are still exploitable? How much of it is a really good Rams defense? That's one of the things that weighs into the idea of whether you're going to play Trubisky at home this week against Green Bay, or if you had Cam Newton on the other side. Which one?
I don't trust Mr. Trubisky, and I probably will never trust Mitchell Trubisky.
I'm glad we got that all out now, Matt.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, he's not, the difference between Mitchell Trubisky and Jared Goff is that Mitchell Trubisky continues to make dumb mistakes. They both will have up and down days, but Bears fans will continue to swear until they've had just about enough of him, and his career's finally put to rest as a starter. Will probably claim that he's every bit on the level as some of the other better quarterbacks in the league who have up and down weeks. And I think that really the difference between what people know of a good quarterback is and a quarterback who isn't quite that good is really the way that people look at guys like Jared Goff and Mitchell Trubisky, and it will happen it will rage on for the next 2 to 3 years until Trubisky either gets a second contract and we look at him like Kirk Cousins and go, what happened? He looked so good for 4 games, he looked so great for 8 games.
Blake Bortles even.
He was great for a season, he has fatal flaws, and that fatal flaw is his decision making. So I don't trust him. And even though the Packers may have a weaker defense in certain respects, he makes dumb enough decisions on a regular enough basis that the type of coverage and young players that they have in Green Bay can take full advantage of that. And so, no, I don't trust Mitchell Trubisky. And I would be looking at Mitchell Trubisky and Cam Newton and be going, I know I should start Mitchell Trubisky, but do I really feel good about that? But if you've got him and you've ridden the highs and lows with him and you don't have many other options, then you're good to go. But no.
the sound sums up. Vault me. Okay, I want to drill down on this Chicago Green Bay game while we're on this. And I guess, Gene, one of the things I can ask you before we dive into this game, just to set this up, is Randall Cobb, because we did see week 1, a tremendous game. The Chicago Green Bay game was one of the most memorable games of the first half of the year, not just week 1. And it was Randall Cobb looking more like young Randall Cobb, breaking off that long touchdown to win that game. And since then, he's been on the injury report until this week. Do you dare to go back to Randall Cobb, or at the very least, do we still think of him as injury prone? I don't trust him because of that Randall Cobb, or do you think there's some meaning we can get out of this change to his status?
Yeah, I think you're only going to know that in hindsight. I think it's nice that he's off the injury report. He's been playing for a couple of weeks, increasing his snap count and things with game time. Joe Philbin running things now. How is that going to change the offense a little bit? We know that Aaron Rodgers likes Randall Cobb. They're very good friends. He knows where Cobb is going to be and when. I still think Adams and Jones are the two primary offensive options there. So when you're looking at a third or a fourth option, just really depends on the matchup and how the game flow goes and how Rodgers chooses to attack when he gets the ball in his hands. So I think there's good reasons to feel better about Cobb this week, but I don't know that, as you used the term earlier in the show, I don't know that Cobb is back on the circle of trust just yet.
No, well, and in some ways, you might play Cobb as a fade on Aaron Rodgers' ability to throw downfield in this game. So I'll ask you, Gene, and I know because every single one of your teams is in the playoffs. Do you have any?
Not anymore.
Well,
I started James Conner over Joe Mixon last week. Yeah, I did that.
Well, it's okay.
that cost me.
If we're gonna do like the 12-step program, let me tell you stories about things that I've done this year.
Otherwise,
I started.
And then Bob Henry. I got Coopered and Tannehilled against Bob Henry in the OG League.
A lot of people got Coopered. And I started in that same Festival OG League, being now that I'm the one of the three of us that are still alive. I started Lamar Miller over Damian Williams. So yeah. So Gene, do you have any tough decisions that hinge on any of the players in this Green Bay Chicago game today?
No, not really. I don't have as many Packers this year as I have had in the past. It just didn't get to Devontae Adams. I have some Aaron Jones, and where I have Aaron Jones, I'm playing him, so not so much. And I don't think I have a single Chicago Bear on any of my teams.
Ooh, you also the Mitchell Trubisky factor not going to affect Gene's teams, but Matt, it's affecting some other teams out there, folks listening and watching right now. So, first of all, on the Chicago side, Matt, hinging on your feelings about Mitchell Trubisky, are you more hesitant to play? And the way I put it at this time of year, if you're live in week 15, if you're a listener to the show, you're a Football Guy subscriber, you're a savvy fantasy player. So if you're already winnowed it down to the point where you know it's a tough call, then you're probably right that it's a tough call. So because of that Mitchell Trubisky factor, Matt, do you break ties against Allen Robinson today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've been recommending that pretty much for weeks, and I'm not changing from that.
And Gene, is there any reason medically to break ties against Allen Robinson today?
No, I don't think so. I think he's been playing pretty well through these injuries recently. He was back to a full practice by the end of the week. Don't worry too much about that questionable designation. I don't have too much concern about him.
So, Matt, does then the assumption of rational coaching, if Matt Nagy is seeing what we're seeing and knows what we know and has even more access on the inside, does that mean, with the Bears having opportunity to clinch the division today, does that mean that it's more of a Tariq Cohen, or maybe even for the first time all year, or at least since week one when he actually looked pretty good and had a decent line, you trust Jordan Howard because rational coaching would say, don't put the game in the hands of the quarterback, put the game in the hands of this dynamic backfield duo?
No, because they need, they're still in the belief stage or in the not denial stage that Mitchell Trubisky is a good quarterback. So, and I mean, I know that sounds
no, this is good assumption of
but that's where they are, and they have to be that way. If I were coaching, I would feel the same way, that this is the guy we've rolled the dice with in our NFL draft. We decided that this was the guy that we were going to go with.
Right.
And what I'm talking about that he's a bad quarterback is I feel like I've seen enough, and I'm probably going to be wrong, but I feel like I've seen enough to know that he's never going to be that upper echelon guy that they think he is. But they're still in that stage of evaluating that, and they're going to go through that process. And these big games are part of that. So they're going to put it in his hands, but which also means that Tariq Cohen is the guy that will wind up being probably the better play of the two running backs.
And going back to our quarterback barometer, Matt, on the other side of this matchup, I mean, the Marcy Rossman rule, subcease, I don't know if it applies because I don't think Aaron Rodgers brought us to the dance. I think other players on our roster probably brought us to the dance if we have Aaron Rodgers and we're still alive in the playoffs. So Cam Newton or Aaron Rodgers, and talk about Rodgers as a start this week in your fantasy lineup.
Oh, I'm starting Rodgers, and I'm not even worried about it. He's kind of like how would I put this? I would say that I would say that Aaron Rodgers, now that they've gotten rid of Mike McCarthy, and now that they're probably excited about what they're going to do on offense and try it out, this team is probably going to buy into whatever's going on a little bit more and see what they can do. See if there's a little bit more that they can do after 1 week of adjustments. Um, so I would definitely roll the dice with Rodgers in this case, as opposed to a slightly banged up Newton or significantly banged up Newton, depending on how hard he hit that Sears Tower falling out of the B-2 bomber.
And really quick, just because we've already touched on Dallas and Indy, and there's not much on the Dallas side that's nuanced. You play Zeke, you play Cooper. But what about Dak Prescott in this quarterback hot, warm scale? Where does he fit in?
He fits in very well. In fact, he's a guy that I recommended in the series I'm doing on Dynasty targets as an emerging force. And I know that may seem weird because he emerged as his first year, but he really had a steady slide year 2 and year 3. And the fact that he's kind of come out of that because they got him another receiver and the offensive line got a little bit healthier, he's never gonna be the guy that armchair quarterbacks are gonna like, who think they know what technically sound quarterbacking looks like, because he doesn't hit those boxes very well. Because he's always going to be a little late with his anticipation. He's always going to be a guy that doesn't have his footwork perfect, but he's going to be that guy who can buy time and find the open player, who seems to, who's got a team around him now with Cooper and with Elliott, that he's got 2 weapons that he can deal with, and that offensive line is going to get better, whether Frederick comes back and becomes the force that he was at center again at some point, or they go out and get another center. This offensive line is getting better and better, and he's the number 6 quarterback in fantasy league since week 9. You got to keep going with him, and I think that he's a guy that, you look at the difference between he and Mitchell Trubisky, and it's like, ultra sensitive Cowboys fans who, because they Dallas loves their high school football and Texas loves their high school football, they all think they know, they all think they're on the level of, Jason Garrett when it comes to understanding what's going on with their team. So they're going to be, they're probably going to be ultra critical of Dak Prescott, but Prescott's a guy that I think the difference between he and Mitchell Trubisky is that Prescott actually does make better decisions, or the decisions that he makes that are bad are part of one flaw, as opposed with Trubisky where he's got several.
And really quickly, one last note on this Chicago Green Bay game, Matt. Any hesitation at all to play Aaron Jones after what the Bears did to Todd Gurley last week?
Yeah, definitely, definitely, because as much as I like what Aaron Jones can do, it's just, this is a team, especially now, that I don't trust. I don't trust that a team influenced by Aaron Rodgers is going to want to run the ball. I don't trust that Aaron Rodgers really cares about the run game enough to stick with it if things get a little bit harried. So I would say that while Jones is capable of a good week, if he's your running back too, I understand why you might have some issues with whether or not you should start him, based on what else you have on your bench. So he's definitely one that you would start exploring better options, or considering other options, this morning or this entire week.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I still think there's a chance that the wheels could come off for the Packers in this one. Or maybe that's just some sort of wish fulfillment. I'm not sure, but I do know, I do know, Gene, that if you have wishes about the 49ers offense, there's a lot of questions. It's everybody that matters really in this offense. Well, not everybody, but George Kittle's fine. But we've got lots of questionable status for the 49ers. This is also an afternoon game, so at least until the Steelers somehow fumble away the game during commercial breaks, you can check out an interesting game, 49ers and Seahawks. But who are we going to be watching when the 49ers have the ball?
I think everybody's going to play. Matt Breida was, quote unquote, given the green light to go this week, assuming there weren't any issues. And the last time he aggravated his injury was in pregame warmups a couple of weeks ago. So that's why he said, assuming everything goes well, Breida did. But it seems like he's going to play. And then the question becomes, do the Niners want to take a little bit longer look at Jeff Wilson? How effective is Breida in the first quarter, knowing they've already shut him down once? If he has any issues at all, they're less likely to allow him to continue to play as they were maybe a month or so ago. But I think he's going to go, and he's been effective despite multiple aggravations already. So see how that goes. I think he's going to go. Dante Pettis and Marquise Goodwin were both added to the injury report, Pettis with a foot and Goodwin with a calf, as the week progressed. But there didn't seem to be any concern from the local media. There weren't really any updates from Kyle Shanahan. The reports from both Schefter and Rappaport overnight were positive to the point where just they're expected to play. There was no see how he looks in pregame warmups, might be on a limited snap count, none of that. So both of those look like relatively minor injuries that shouldn't slow folks down. And, we've heard in the past with Goodwin and Garcon and other players, Breida included, Alfred Morris included, from the Niners when they have a little bit of concern. And there hasn't been about those players. So I think I'd feel pretty comfortable that all of them are going to play and that at least Pettis and Goodwin should play without any limitation.
So with that in mind, and really quickly, Gene, not that it affects our lineups this week, when you solve for X being whatever it is that's going on with Rashad Penny's knee, can you come up with any theories, or is it anything we should be worried about, or is this one of those things that it'll just be a blip, a footnote, and we won't come back to it?
Well, no, I think we're going to come back to it. I don't think it's as simple as it may turn out to be this simple, but right now it does not read as simple as give him a week off and have him come back. Didn't limit him too much in the game, it didn't seem like, but afterwards, in particular on Monday, he was more sore than was expected. There was some testing done that Pete Carroll kind of minimized, but not to the extent where you'd think this was definitely just a 1 week situation. You wonder if the Seahawks weren't in the thick of the playoff range, if we would hear a little bit more about this being a more concerning injury. That was kind of the trend in what I was hearing from the Seahawks, and not meaning long-term situation, but 4 to 6 weeks enough where he really didn't have any chance to return by week 17. So that's my suspicion. I think there's still room and hope that come tomorrow, Pete Carroll will have things to say that are positive, and on Wednesday he'll be back to practice and playing. But I think you should at least be thinking of this as a multiple week injury at this point.
And I would ask you about Doug Baldwin, but even with Doug Baldwin likely playing, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think my concern with Baldwin is what comes next, because I think these injuries are stacking on each other. There's still a knee condition that we have to be concerned about in the offseason. I'm still suspicious of this groin, now a little bit different with the hip. Maybe there's just some compensatory and cascade things, but it will not shock me if we hear that Baldwin's been playing with a sports hernia for a month and there's something more that needs to be done there. So today, not so much, but future-wise, we're probably going to have some more conversation about him this offseason.
He's a desperation play. And part of the reason, Matt, he's a desperation play, let's go to the Seattle-San Francisco game. Part of the reason he's a desperation play is the low volume of targets from Russell Wilson. And we actually saw the disastrous floor, even though he did contribute some as a runner last week against Minnesota. But that was Minnesota. This is San Francisco's defense, a little more vulnerable defense. Back to the quarterback barometer, Matt. Where does Russell Wilson fit in this week?
Above Mitchell Trubisky.
Forget about the Mendoza line. We got the Trubisky line now.
Yeah, we do. Actually, that's we have the Trubisky bottom step, actually. But it's not that bad. But I'd say that Wilson against San Francisco, this is a type of game where the teams know each other reasonably well. That usually means that sometimes you're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more to win. I also think that the San Francisco cornerbacks are pretty weak. They do have some weaknesses, and I think that Doug Baldwin is the type of guy that can exploit that. But again, then you're also looking at David Moore and what he's been able to do, and Tyler Lockett. So he's not Doug Baldwin, I understand, is a weak play and remains as such. But Wilson, as it is, I think what he's able to bring to the equation, I think he's going to have a better game this week as well. Usually you don't see him have two really bad efforts in a row.
Is Matt Breida the attractive nuisance this week, Matt? Is Matt Breida one of these players? Because we've seen him ball out at times. We've also seen him hurt himself in warmups or you kind of want to think about it, but is this one of those, remember how, and Matt Breida, I think we need to remember when we look back at this year that Matt Breida showed us that he's a tremendous running back. But for this year, at least, while he's still stuck in this injury loop, should you consider him today?
You can, but it's one of those deals. I feel like the people having Matt Breida decisions are like me having wide receiver decisions in another league I'm in, where I've got guys like Pettis, Godwin, and Foster as a trio. But if they let me start 3 running backs, I could have like Kenneth Dixon or,
Yeah.
or Doug Martin. You know what I mean? So it's like one of those situations where you look at Breida and you know what he can bring, but I think he's the guy that you just leave alone. You just keep him on your bench just because as good as he can be, you just don't know. I mean, it just seems like every game something happens where it's like starting to pick up momentum downhill and then the wheel falls off and he careens off into the hay bales, you know,
Mhm.
in his Elmo outfit.
I like where this is going. Are people going to like where starting Dante Pettis is going? He's a hot shooter right now. 3 touchdown games, 2 touchdown game, and against Seattle. Now, granted, it was after Seattle had opened up a big lead. Is Dante Pettis, even with the questionable tag, knowing, like Dr. Gene said, and I would endorse that he is going to play and probably without limitations, is he the kind of player that you almost shoehorn or want to talk yourself into playing this week?
I'm starting him right now and said lineup. And, you know, I'll ask you guys what you think because my choices are Pettis, Patterson, Godwin, and Foster. And I've got to start 3 of those 4. And I just picked up Patterson. I could re-pick up Aguilar. I could pick up Keelan Cole, but none of those guys sound all that fun. I think Patterson against the Steelers could be fun.
It could be, but I think you have. I mean, Pettis is the number 1 out of those 3, I would say, and then Foster just because of the big play upside. And I don't know if they're going to use Darius Slay on Foster. He makes more sense on Zay Jones, and then Godwin third. But I'm not optimistic at all about the Tampa offense today. Anybody in the Tampa offense, I might, except for Mike Evans, who I won't be surprised if he puts up like 4 for 42 or something. I'm steering clear of the Tampa offense today. But he did say, guys, Gene, and you're a guy on this show right now. Do you have anything to say about any of the tangential issues we talk about?
I mean,
You've given us Pettis.
He's the one with all the teams in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's the one of the 3 of us that has the best chance of winning a championship. So we should be asking you. But you have anything to weigh in on any of these players, games, teams, units implicated on Matt's tough decision?
No, I don't know that I feel great about Patterson, I guess. And I
Well,
think I think Goodwin
Godwin.
has a chance to bounce back. You know, you like the targets even if they didn't work out very well last week. So I'm pretty much looking at volume. I'm looking at upside. Patterson definitely has some of that, but I think those other players probably have a little bit more single game upside than what you're going to get with Patterson.
Well, let me ask you this as a connoisseur of the defensive football. Should we be considering Baltimore not quite on the Chicago level, but on one of those defenses that we respect level, especially after what they did in Kansas City last week? Or do we look at Tampa's track record and ability to pass? Well, and actually, there's a key piece of this that you can give us some very informed insight on. Jameis Winston, first half, tremendous against the Saints. Second half, after he gets a little banged up, not so much. So how does that factor into our outlook for the Tampa offense at Baltimore today?
Same way it always does. I think Winston is inconsistent, and inconsistently inconsistent, I guess you might even call him.
Yeah.
So, and when you face, Marlon Humphrey's a little bit banged up. There are still some other issues going on with that Baltimore defense, but as a group, as a whole, from a scheme perspective, from a front to back, front 4 pass rush and stopping the run, linebackers working well as a unit, and that secondary is a little bit underrated even when banged up. I think they present a challenge for Tampa Bay anyway. And then knowing that Winston can be very inconsistent, and unless he gets off to a good start, probably has no chance of playing well. So you're hoping he gets off to a good start, and then that follows through later in the game. Because as you mentioned, looking good early does not necessarily mean that he's going to look good late. So I have some concern about Tampa Bay overall. But again, the targets are going to be there for Godwin. So, it gives you pause knowing that he only had 1 out of 10 of them successful last week, but at least they're there.
Mitchell Trubisky and Jameis Winston walk into a bar.
Exactly. No, I was going to tell you, and I was going to set up the punchline for you because, is Winston below the Trubisky line this week, Matt?
They're about equal, I think. I think they're about equal, and I would probably go with Winston just because I think that he's more likely to have to throw his way out of into staying competitive. Whereas with the Bears, they have a better shot with their run game and their defense to keep things at a kind of Rams Bears level as it was last week, where the Bears can win 9-6 and Trubisky can look like rotten meat in the cave that the Bears hopefully don't hibernate in. But they can still win the game. Whereas I think with the Buccaneers, they're gonna have to throw, and I think that just gives you a little bit better opportunity.
So is part of the reason, Matt, that Jameis Winston might have to just throw his way out of the box and not necessarily be able to do it? Is it Kenneth Dixon? And it's another one of those situations for me. I actually have Kenneth Dixon, Matt, at my number 20 running back this week. And I feel like this is one of those skate to where the puck is going to be. You hear John Harbaugh saying we need to give Kenneth Dixon more work. This isn't a slight on Gus Edwards, who has done very well for an undrafted free agent, but Kenneth Dixon's the best running back they have in that backfield. This is a good matchup. The defense should set up a good game script. Maybe Dante Pettis, and I do think Dante Pettis is someone you break ties against just because of how well he's been playing. But what about Kenneth Dixon? Is it not only a break ties in favor of Kenneth Dixon, but is this one of those ones where you might not realize that there are some players you should be considering Dixon over in the flex or running back 2 spot?
Yeah, there are, and he's one of those plays that the biggest issue is, are they really going to move him into where he gets the majority of the touches? And that's the big question with him. The talent factor, I mean, he's been the most talented back on that roster for years. He's just been the least reliable one because of off-field injury, injury and the suspension that he had due to PED. But even with the added weight, I mean, he's definitely gained some weight. I mean, but as far back as, when he entered Louisiana Tech, he weighed 235, 240 when he first came to Louisiana Tech, and then lost about 25, 30 pounds and had most of his career that way. So I think he's naturally a bigger guy. And I've had folks joke around that he looks like Mike Tolbert now. But he kind of does. He kind of has that
the CeeLo of running backs.
He really does, but he's playing well. And so I think of the hot tub in Family Guy when I start thinking of CeeLo, but there's but I don't know. I don't know if Kenneth Dixon's going to have the kind of sway to lure the Tampa. He's going to get enough targets to really lure the Tampa Bay Buccaneers into the hot tub of death. But I would say that it's a situation where, as a running back 3, he's a definite guy that I would consider. But I could imagine how, like, I have Todd Gurley, David Johnson, and I'm sitting here thinking, I hope Gurley doesn't get benched. Would I start a John Kelly or a Dixon over that situation, or that kind? No, but if you're looking at like Eagles running backs, or this might be Dixon is probably a better play.
I just in DFS especially, I like Dixon. I think we've covered the major injuries. We're not going to. The Buffalo Bills backfield doesn't matter. Okay, it's Josh Allen's backfield anyway. So Gene, we got like 20 minutes left. And first thing I'm going to ask you before I start to use this metaphor: Are hot tubs really infectious boiling pits of viruses and bacteria? Should we be worried about getting into hot tubs?
Yeah. Yes.
Ooh. I've got some life decisions to rethink right now.
If it's your hot tub and your mess of
with the hotel hot tub,
stay away from the hotel hot tub. And
this message brought to you by Dr. Gene.
Or one in Las Vegas.
That one, boo. Yeah, maybe that's where it all went wrong. Okay, Dr. Gene, let's make this painful. And talk about the hot tub. Who's going to get in? Who's allowed in our hot tub, and who's not? Because they might infect the rest of our team.
I was surprised we didn't.
Keeping with our SNL theme.
Yeah, our old man references. Go ahead, Matt.
I was surprised we didn't make that reference last week.
Yeah, this is good. Okay, so this is kind of like who's allowed in hot tub, who's not allowed in hot tub. Let's talk about the New England backfield, Gene. Do you have? I know you traded away James White and Red Eye Masters. Do you have any tough New England backfield situation calls this week, or do you have any advice if you were to simulate that? What do we do with the Patriots? Patriots Steelers game is going to determine a lot of fantasy matchups this week. Are the Patriots any of the Patriot running backs going to help us or hurt us?
I think you can reliably play James White. I don't think you can play Rex Burkhead. I think you see Sony Michel as kind of a lower level running back two or a flex with some upside. I think that's probably the way it shakes out. I don't have any tough decisions. I'm going to play Mixon over Michel in the league that I have Michel. I've got a few leagues where I've stashed Burkhead, but he hasn't done enough, and there's enough instability in the depth chart there where you don't expect him to get enough touches to be productive. But I think it probably breaks down White, Michel, and then Burkhead as a long third.
Let's go to this New England-Pittsburgh game. The torment. By the end of this game, the Steelers may be officially out of the playoffs with 2 games left to go and need some help to get in the playoffs. Please suppress your smiles. Okay, Matt. Let's and I'll lead in with my take. I really do think that this is a James White game and not a Sony Michel game. And I would even be inclined to say in PPR leagues, maybe you take a chance, especially if you're down. Enough things have happened out at the bottom and top end range of players that have already played in these first 3 games that you know when you say, okay, I've got to get 25 points out of the spot. I think James White might provide you that. I feel reasonably certain Sony Michel won't. Or am I thinking I know how to project this New England offense against the Steelers just because I'm a Steelers fan neurotic and you have some very sober wisdom to give us on how to project this offense?
No, I think you're probably right, just because with the Steelers and their rush, they will probably try and get the ball out quick to White in certain scenarios. The only issue about that is that Sony Michel, in terms of what his skill set is, he can do a lot of what White does as a receiver. Not so much maybe after the catch with what White can do, but in terms of being able to get out there and get open. But I don't know if they're going to use him in that capacity. So I would say White's probably your safer play there. But listen, I'm just ecstatic that the Browns beat the Broncos in Denver and that they are still alive in the playoffs. And
in the division, even
win the division because of the win and the tie that they had with the Steelers, or the tie they had with the Steelers. So yeah, you could knock me over with a feather right now.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. And then what was it, like 11-game losing streak to the Broncos or something like that they beat, that they cracked. So any hesitation at all on the other side? Really quickly, Gene, I'll just let you chime in. This is funny. Ben Roethlisberger did have broken ribs after all, but it doesn't matter this week.
Let me get off mute to address Ben Roethlisberger here. No, it sounds like he probably didn't have that significant of a rib injury after all. Not that rib injuries are not painful, but I think, MRI, X-ray, what have you, if at best they were probably bruised or maybe there was some cracked rib cartilage there, it doesn't seem like there was a bony injury. He should be okay to play. They'll have him padded up. They'll have him medicated. I'm not too concerned about him being able to play well or finish the game.
Yeah, and I think that this is a game where if you have either one of these quarterbacks, I mean, I guess if you have to say Brady or Roethlisberger, maybe that's where it might enter into the picture. And it's obviously not entering into the picture, Matt, if you have a Juju or Antonio Brown. You're going to play both of those guys. Jalen Samuels, with James Conner not playing this week, but expected to return next week. Weigh in on your confidence level on Jalen Samuels. And then with New England, when we try to project a rational offensive game plan, it actually seems reasonable to start our lineups based on that. With Steelers, not always so much. But I continue to come back to Vance McDonald and the idea that the Patriots are good at taking away what you're comfortable doing. It sure seems to me if Ben Roethlisberger's making good decisions and the Steelers' game plan is a good game plan. And now the Steelers' offense and the Packers' offense are similar. I like the way you brought up, like, if it's an Aaron Rodgers offense, I don't know if they're going to run that much because, Aaron Rodgers doesn't care about that. Well, Ben Roethlisberger doesn't care if you leave Vance McDonald open. Ben Roethlisberger doesn't care if Jalen Samuels is always there as a check down to get 5, 6, 7 yards and put the offense in good spots. Ben Roethlisberger is going to keep chucking it to Smith-Schuster and Brown, even if Brown has Gilmore blanketing him or Smith-Schuster is double teamed, then I expect something like that. So how does that inform us when we're on the fence about Vance McDonald and Jalen Samuels and decisions, knowing what the right thing to do would be, but knowing that Ben Roethlisberger, he's not good at doing the right thing all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also about how these players match up against the defenders themselves, and not just always about. I mean, I think your points about Ben Roethlisberger are probably the primary ones you want to look at, but I'll just explore the secondary one too, which is that you look at Jalen Samuels and you say, is he faster than Frank Gore? I don't think so. Is
Mm-mm,
he quicker than Frank Gore? Not
mm-mm.
really. Can he break more tackles than Frank Gore even right now? No. Frank Gore had a pretty good game against New England a couple weeks ago. I don't think Jalen Samuels is going to match up well against those linebackers as slow as they are. So I do see a lot of, like, if Jalen Samuels gets the ball, it might be 4 catches in the first half for 12 yards, or maybe 20 to 25 yards, and then they go away from him because they realize that they're not getting much out of him in that regard. So I would not play Jalen Samuels. I'd take a chance on Kenneth Dixon this week over Jalen Samuels. That'd be a good example of a guy that I might go with Kenneth Dixon there. As far as Vance McDonald goes, I mean, I think that he has a chance for a bigger game because he is a good athlete. He does match up well against those linebackers, and I could see him having one. But he's so boom bust in that way where it's like one play is going to make the difference, really, of whether you wanted to play him or not. And when you're making lineup decisions and you're thinking, is he going to get that one play? That's not a good. That's a very high risk level type of decision.
Speaking of high risk, now we can throw it open. The velvet rope around your hot tub, Gene. Who are some of the guys waiting at the velvet rope that you're not sure whether you're going to wave them in? You're going to say, not today.
Hmm. I don't know. I still think the biggest thing that I'm watching is Hilton. I think everything else was fairly straightforward this week from an injury perspective. Not too worried about anybody else that's out there. Hopefully, you're not relying too much on Matt Breida and Rashad Penny. I mean, those guys were a little bit more concerning. I'm a little bit surprised that Austin Hooper is going to play, given what Dan Quinn said earlier in the week, and then the fact that he hadn't practiced. So that recovery went a lot more smoothly than expected. So I think he's going to be available. Hopefully, I'm still waiting. We've been kind of dragging our feet all the way up to 10:50 here at this point Eastern time, and there's been no news on Hilton at all. And inactives are coming out in 40 minutes. I'm not really sure what to think about that. Still patiently waiting there.
Matt, how about you? Is anybody waiting at the velvet ropes around your hot tub that you're thinking, I'm not sure whether you belong in the club?
Ian Thomas, he hasn't been. I he hasn't. The Saints haven't been very giving to tight end play, but at the same time, I feel like that he's been a guy that injured Cam Newton has been going to a fair bit, and I think that's going to continue to happen. So he might get the flag in, but when I think of, like, I just start laughing because I think of Gene having a hot tub and allowing people in it, and I think that would be
No.
that would be a good idea. He might
Right.
the result might be you feel like Ben Roethlisberger crying in the corner softly with the lights out.
Right.
Afterwards.
I can imagine, like, we brought our swimming trunks, Gene, and then Gene like zooms in on like the forehead and sees like everything wriggling on it, be like, mm, I don't know. So let's just toss this open. Like, it's not just as fantasy analysts and fantasy players and simulate these things, but let's talk about this. Some other players I think that folks might be a bit hesitant about, or maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. So, Gene, I'll tee up the first one for you. What about Derrick Henry playing the Giants today after what he did Thursday night last week?
I'm fine with any running back against that secondary or against that back seven, especially with Landon Collins not there. There's just not a lot of players back there. The defensive line is all right, but I'm fine playing Derrick Henry. You know what you're going to get with him. I don't think that you would necessarily put 200 whatever yards and 4 touchdowns in the likely range of anything ever with Derrick Henry, but there's certainly a number of yards and 1 or 2 touchdown upside against this Giants team.
Matt, do you believe in miracles? Do you believe that Kenyon Drake can do something in Minnesota this week that actually makes us happy to play him in our lineups?
Yeah, I actually do. And I think it's mainly because the way that they use him as a receiver downfield is a way that is able to exploit Minnesota's weaknesses as cover linebackers. If they can match him up on wheel routes or bullet routes the way that they do with Kenyon Drake, he can get that big play. But he's like a more positive version of Vance McDonald. You might be relying on 1 to 2 plays out of him to really buoy your fantasy prospects with him, but the likelihood that they're going to try is probably pretty high.
Gene, there really hasn't been much in between with Mark Ingram this year. You've either been really happy you had him in your lineup or wonder why you started him. Which one is more likely after the game's over tomorrow night?
Oh, how do you read Mark Ingram? How do you read the Saints offense at this point? It's not been as good the last couple of weeks, and maybe it's because of the opponents. And now you've got a division game on the road that might be a little bit of an issue. I think you probably would prefer to attack Carolina outside rather than inside, but it's really difficult to know. Going to be without Teron Armstead again, Ryan Ramczyk and Andrus Peat with both missing practice this week. Drew Brees hasn't quite been what he was. That Carolina defense is going to be without Quan Short, somewhat surprisingly. But I don't know. I just don't think you can project enough touches to feel comfortable. You probably 12 to 15 as the max, which may be enough to get running back 2 status for you. And he gets red zone carries, so there's some upside there. But I think I'd probably go with the other 2 options that we just talked about over Ingram today.
Will Adam Harstead still be bragging about having these 2 guys at the end of this week?
Yeah, well, against me, well, it doesn't matter because I played Lamar Miller over Damian Williams. But this isn't about me. This is about everyone else out there that has Mark Ingram, Matt. And I want to say, and this means bench Mark Ingram. I actually really like Mark Ingram this week. He was the third and fourth quarter, especially fourth quarter running back last week. He performed well. He helped them win the game. And I think that Sean Payton is very cognizant of the way that his offense needs to have multiple modes if they're going to make it to the Super Bowl, if they're going to protect this number 1 seed. And I actually think that it is going to be a good Mark Ingram game tomorrow night. And I think players are going to be happy that they put Ingram in their lineup if they're breaking ties. How would you advise them?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to go for it there. I mean, I think it's a situation where while I agree that the offensive line has some issues, and that's been a concern, and I think it's probably one of the reasons I've been asking about it on our injury segment on Thursday nights for so many weeks. But I would say that the way you look at Carolina's defense and you look at how this game's going to be close, I think there's going to be enough opportunities for him to get the ball and do some good things with it, and they're not going to be running behind where Teron Armstead was supposed to be on every play. So I think that he's a low end running back too for me with high upside.
Got just a few minutes left here before we're all on our own to make our week 15 decisions. I guess I could come up with some witty ways to tee up some of these guys. Well, maybe not so witty. Attempted wit. Arrest me for attempted wit. But as we wind up here, I guess
half wits when it comes to
dimwits, half wits.
Yep.
But that's in 287 of you continue to suffer. It's 288, so it's going in the right direction. I guess I'll throw it open, Gene, and I'll just ask you anything else that is on your mind going into these games. If you want to, feel free to weigh in on the stuff we're hearing about Melvin Gordon and James Conner this morning, whether people should trust that or just you can do your mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore monologue. Anything you want.
I don't think that's going to happen. This week for me is about I'm planning for week 15, 16, 17 still, but there's a lot of things happening this week with Carson Wentz. And we talked about Doug Baldwin and a few other players that I think we're already listening to what's being said now to prepare for the offseason and being concerned about what to watch for. That doesn't really apply to today, but for next week, those of you that have James Conner and Melvin Gordon and T.Y. Hilton, hopefully all of you'll work your way through this week 15 somehow and be ready to go at full strength for week 16, because a lot of folks, some of my teams that had those players had buys last week, and the teams I am putting out there do not look like playoff teams at all. And I'm sure a lot of you are in that same situation. So I think what we're hearing about Melvin Gordon on Thursday was good. I'm still a little bit nervous about James Conner, but I think what we're hearing about him is good. Hopefully both of those guys will be practicing on Wednesday, and we'll have them back next week.
And Dodo Beckham?
Yeah, Beckham, so I think we talked on Thursday night that what it sounded like was that he had a bruise, and that's kind of what he confirmed yesterday, that he called it a contusion and a hematoma, and that's what happens. You get blood inside that muscle, and sometimes it just does not go away very quickly, and it causes soreness, and it causes loss of strength, and it can take a little while to get over. And there may not, although the initial injury that started the process may have been some time ago, just the way in which he moves or another subtle little thing could have made things a little bit worse. I think it was alarming that he left on Thursday to see a specialist. Even more alarming that they ruled him out again earlier without even giving him a shot to warm up in pregame again. And he said, expletive aside, stuff ain't right this week. So there's room to be hopeful that it recovers through the early part of the week and we see him back. But I didn't include him in that list for a reason. I think Beckham is the one that of all the players that we're talking about may be least likely to play next week, just given the tone of how things progress this week.
And one more, Gene, because you mentioned Carson Wentz, and I just want to ask you this as more of a, as Cease would say, a Thursday night topic. But I want to ask you this while I've got just a minute or two left, just to get your reaction, your knee-jerk reaction, because other players are coming out of the woodwork now, former Eagles players, and talking about the staff. Do you think this is the kind of thing that would happen? Because we had this Martellus Bennett thing with the Packers and a bunch of players saying, no. Let me tell you how great the Packers staff was. Is it a telltale sign that we're seeing players come out of the woodwork, or are we magnifying just a few accounts and really this is a non-story?
I don't think it's a non-story because the players that have been involved in the past are making it a story, and the accusations that they are leveling are serious and significant. Would you hear some of these? We're hearing some of these things the year after they won a Super Bowl. So would you hear them this year if they were a little bit more successful? I don't know. I'm probably not in a good place to comment on this at all because whatever I would say would be third, fourth, fifth hand. But the medical staffs are different than they used to be, and that players go and seek out second opinions rather than stick with their own medical staff. A lot of times, this is a huge business. The salary cap just increased another $20 million or something this year. So players feel pressure to perform. Coaching staffs feel pressure to perform. I'm sure medical staffs feel pressure to try to keep players as healthy as possible so they can continue to play, and they're getting pressure for all sides. You would hope that the medical folks would separate themselves from that as much as possible, but players hide concussions, players hide injuries, and you hope there's never a situation in which diagnoses or treatment plans are hidden, or a player is pushed when they shouldn't. You would also hope that a player wouldn't push themselves in those situations. But we know human nature being what it is, the NFL being what it is, adrenaline and competitiveness and all of those things being what it is. I'm sure there's undoubtedly some truth to what Emmanuel Acho is saying. But again, you hear players defend team doctors and medical staffs that have been spoken of poorly in the past. So there's no way we have enough information to decide about this. What we're hearing is obviously disappointing. Hopefully all involved try to take care of the players as best as they can, both for their immediate and long-term futures. And it's probably not the end we're going to hear of what's going on in Philadelphia over the last couple of years.
Human nature, competitiveness, all of these things factoring into our Week 15 lineups, factoring into what we watch on the field. Again, so far so good with 3 excellent, competitive, very draining in a good way games to watch. And this is going to be a draining afternoon, evening, and into tomorrow night. So Week 15, we love that you get a chance to join us, and really, this is a great pleasure as we're starting to wind up. I'm going to be on the road to New Orleans during this week because I can't say for sure what the schedule is going to be with the podcast and on the couch and so on. But we will definitely be back Thursday night. We will be back Sunday morning next week, and we'll report back to how things went. And good, bad, or ugly, we're on this journey with you. Thank you, everybody. And no, there's no truth to the rumor that Matt Waldman will be getting a Mitchell Trubisky tattoo if he throws for 3 touchdowns today.